Well, welcome to Kalamazoo. We are so honored and privileged and excited to have you here. You know, we started this journey on with the Promise about 8 years ago, on a night where I'm traveling to a meeting and I'm told I have to get to the school board meeting. I said, well, what am I going there for? I was just elected to be the vice mayor of our community, and no, I have this thing I have to go to. And they said, no, you need to get to the school board meeting. And I said, no, I'm not going. I've already had this appointment. So I hung up the phone, and I remember the conversation I had with a friend several months earlier. And this friend had talked about college for kids and how do we do that and all of these things. And I'm thinking, something big is happening. Something major is happening. So I'm going to go to the school board meeting. And then our good Dr. Brown makes me cry. And I have no children, by the way, so I'm not crying because I just saved myself hundreds of thousands of dollars. Partly I'm crying because I missed the promise by about years, because I am a product of this school system. But I was able to stand and hear this amazing announcement that was about our children. It was about our city and our community. It was about where we go. It's about onward and forward and opportunity and the possible and the promise. And I think about that word promise, and you know, it is a giving. You know, we heard a lot of our community talking about this great gift. This great gift. And as I sat down that night, I thought, whoa, this is not a gift. You know, we're excited. Yes, someone's giving you something. But this is moreover probably the largest responsibility we have for our children, for our city. And as I look at you folks 8 years later, for our nation. Because we here in Kalamazoo was able to sort of make this promised world happen. Sort of igniting all of you to do the great things you are going to do with the children and the cities and communities that you live in. Amazing 8-year journey. And here we are. Pittsburgh, El Dorado, think Akron if I'm not mistaken. Wow. An amazing journey that is just starting. That is just starting. I wanted to look up, I talked to Dr. Brown and I've said so many times that we are keepers. That's what we are. And I wanted to look up that word this morning because for some reason I never have and I use it all the time. But I found the definition: a person who manages or looks after something or someone. Words like guardian, custodian, curator, administrator, overseer, steward, and one of my favorites, caretakers. Caretakers. So today, I welcome you to our community. Today, I hope that you will learn, and tomorrow, many things that continue to move your children forward, that continues to revitalize communities, and always have us thinking about going onward. Thank you.
Good morning. As Janice said, I'm Katie Sandifer, and I am very lucky to be a part of Murphy Oil Corporation, which is the corporate sponsor of the Dorado Promise in El Dorado, Arkansas. Our program is quite unique in that way, in that we are the sole donor for the program. But all the money that anyone could put up for a program like this would be for naught if it weren't for the partnerships and the dedication of the school district, of our education foundations, and those other organizations that we partner with in our communities to make sure that these kids are ready for college. So I want to introduce to you the rest of the El Dorado team that's here today. that has really made this promise possible. And if you guys will stand, Lila Phillips is the Executive Director of the El Dorado Education Foundation, and Alice Mahoney from the Arkansas State Board of Education and the Vice President of the El Dorado Education Foundation. Sylvia Thompson, who is our Promise Director. She is in the school district, connecting with those students every day and making sure that they're ready to go to college, making sure that they understand what the Promise can do for them. And Bob Watson, the superintendent of El Dorado Public Schools, without who really none of this would be possible, because he and his staff have really risen to the challenge of making sure that these kids are ready for college when now that the Promise is available to them. So, the best person to tell you about the El Dorado Promise is Claiborne Deming. He is now the chairman of Murphy's board of directors and was the president and CEO at the time that the company decided to fund this program. Claiborne is passionate about education. One of my favorite quotes from him is that education is the one thing that you can give people that can permanently change their lives. And that really is true. And so today, Claiborne couldn't be with us, but we're going to let you hear a message from him and see some of the kids that the Promise is impacting in El Dorado. Thank you.
When I grow up, I want to be a geologist.
When I grow up, I want to be a lawyer.
I want to be a lawyer.
I want to be a technical engineer.
When I grow up, I want to be a veterinarian.
A veterinarian.
A veterinarian and artist.
I would like to be a cardiologist.
I want to be a marine biologist.
I want to be a biologist. I would like to be a doctor.
When I grow up, I want to be a nurse.
When I grow up, I want to be a pediatrician. I want to be an architect.
I want to be a construction worker.
I want to be an entrepreneur.
When I grow up, I want to be an agriculture engineer.
When I grow up, I want to be a sergeant.
A U.S. Marine.
When I grow up, I would like to be mayor or president.
I want to be part of the U.S. Congress. I want to be a teacher.
Teacher. I want to be a school counselor. I want to be a police officer.
I want to be a truck driver.
A fashion designer.
I would like to be a singer.
I want to be a dancer.
Hello, my name is Claiborne Deming, and I'm chairman of Murphy Oil Corporation, which is a publicly traded oil and gas firm located in El Dorado, Arkansas. In 2007, we announced a $50 million scholarship program, the purpose of which was to send every graduate of the El Dorado school district to college, those who wanted to go to college. The program is really quite simple. We give every student a stipend equal to an amount which is the highest amount charged by Arkansas Public University's tuition. And then they can take that amount and they can go to college anywhere they want to. There really are very few restrictions on it. You don't have to come back to this particular area. And again, you can go to any college or university that you want to with the stipend and apply towards the tuition. And it was deliberately designed to be flexible, just to give maximum opportunity to people in this particular area. Folks have asked me, how did you come up with the idea of the El Dorado Promise? like any ideas that I've had, and actually most people had, it wasn't original. We shamelessly and proudly borrowed the idea from Kalamazoo, Michigan, which, to the best of my knowledge, was the first community in America that did this. It was such a stunningly good idea, and we could see that it would have tremendous impacts here, or potentially could, that we said, gee, why don't we do this? And then folks have asked me, gee, Claiborne, why did you do it? And there really, if you distill it down, there's really two reasons. One is just the intrinsic good of the act itself, really almost pure altruism. What greater gift can you give someone or a community than the opportunity to access education, in particular higher education, especially for those who couldn't otherwise access it. And at least in my own opinion, it's been arguably the single greatest factor in the success of Western civilization. So to offer that normally, I think is an unusual gift and a net societal good that we really embrace. Secondly, is probably a less altruistic reason. This part of Arkansas, really all the area south of Little Rock, has been economically depressed, not exactly the right word, but we certainly haven't grown as fast as other parts of the state of Arkansas, other parts of America. And this gift provides an underpinning, undergirding to this area, and it actually causes people to move here. So it acts as an economic magnet in a way, and then it brings the type of people to your area you want here. That is, people who want to educate their children, provide opportunities to their children, and generally those are the types of people who contribute to your community. And so a great question to ask is, gee, has it been impactful? Has it been successful? And I can start with the school district itself. The district, before we announced the promise in 07, it likely probably had 40 plus 50 years of pretty steady enrollment decline. We were back above 6,000 students enrolled in the 40s and 50s, and we had gone down steadily, not any one particular year being too large, to where we were 4,500 students. Since we have announced the Dorado Promise, we have stopped that decline, totally arrested, and our student enrollment in the district has stabilized. And let me give you some perspective on that. Every district, and there's a lot of them south of Little Rock, Arkansas, have experienced decline. At least everyone that we follow most of them. And some of them have been dramatic, precipitous. And so our stabilization stands out. In fact, I think we are the only district which has had stability. And this includes, for us, larger towns like Commonwealth, Arkansas, Pittsburgh, Arkansas, and every smaller community. So then, if you look at impacts on students themselves, our college going rate, matriculation rate, went from 60% to 90%, did it pretty quickly. And our dropout rate, student dropout rate, went from 70+% to about 1%. And so very tangible, very real, very impactful. And then a consequence I really didn't anticipate, likely should have, the rigor in the course offerings, especially at Dorado High School, has increased. And the best proxy for that are AP courses. We offered a handful before the promise was implemented, and now we offer 19. And basically, if kids know they're going to go to college, they're going to demand or want course flows that prepare them for college and for the rigor of college. And so the district has wonderfully and appropriately responded to that. And so the overall quality, I think, of our educational opportunity here has improved. If you look at the broader area, the broader region, how's it responded? Well, pretty quickly after we announced the promise, we went to the voters and asked for an increase in millage at Golden High School. And to put that from perspective, we had gone to the voters 2 or 3 times before to ask for a millage increase, and had been sounding and rounding to. When we went back to them after the announcement of the promise, we not only passed, it passed with 70% plus of the elective degree, which is, as you well know, in this world of people being worried taxes, is such an unusual event. And we built a new state-of-the-art $43 million high school. In fact, I'm in the library of the high school now talking to you. And it is a beautiful, over 300,000 square foot facility, which is magnificent. And it would not have happened, would not have been constructed except for Dorado Promise. And then secondly, we went to the voters and passed an economic development tax, which had been tried before and also failed. And the first tangible event, manifestation of that tax, construction of a $15 million events conferencing center downtown, it's really part of our two-year college and led by the college. And we are bringing events and holding events at this conference center, which we wouldn't have had the opportunity to do before, so it's brought people into our area. And then secondly, we're in the middle of raising another $50 million to create an arts district here in El Dorado, Arkansas, which will really be located between our downtown core and the two-year college. It was an area which wasn't the best looking part of our town, which now will become probably the best looking part after we do this. And we are close to completing the $50 million fundraising efforts. And so this promise, this event that we announced in 2007, has had extraordinary impacts on this area. It's impacted not only the graduates of our high school, provided opportunity to people who wouldn't otherwise have had it, and have gone on to do things in their life they wouldn't otherwise have had the opportunity to do. But it's also had a dramatic impact on the economy of this particular part of Arkansas, and Arkansas in particular, which has been tangible and real, it wouldn't have happened without Promise. So what you are doing is important. It changes lives, and likely, to use the cliche, always look at the bottom line, it works. If something works, if something is effective, and it has the public good involved with it, then you are the person going along with it. So what you're doing is important, and I applaud you for it, and I wish you good luck. Thank you very much.
Good morning. That was terrific, wasn't it? I have to admit, I think I've seen it before in a slightly different version, but it gets to me every time. I'm Chuck Wilbur. I work with a firm called Public Policy Associates in Lansing, Michigan. And I'm really honored to be able to speak with you this morning at this opening session of PromiseNet 13. This is my fourth PromiseNet, and I'm batting 3 for 3 on those held here in Kalamazoo. And on all those occasions, I have felt a sense of pride as a resident of this state that we were the home, we're the birthplace of not only the Kalamazoo Promise, but this Promise movement that we all feel part of. And so I'm pleased this morning to be able to talk to you about another Michigan point of pride, and that is the Michigan Promise Zones. Because today, through this concept and actually legislation that we call the Promise Zones, Michigan is not only the home of the Kalamazoo Promise, it's also the home of the Baldwin Promise, of the Benton Harbor Promise, the Battle Creek Legacy Scholars, the Detroit Scholarship Fund, the Hazel Park Promise, the Lansing Promise, and the Saginaw Promise. And we have a couple more waiting in the wings as well. These are all universal place-based scholarship programs, and they're operating in our state today. And I'm going to ask you in a few minutes to recognize some of the great people who are making that happen. But first I wanted to tell you a little bit about how we got to this point and why the journey we've been on may be relevant to communities around the country. And it's a story that actually began here in Kalamazoo, no surprise there, I guess, on that day in November 2005 when the Kalamazoo Promise was announced. I was not there that day, and I can tell you why. It's because Janice and her crew really knew how to keep the secret. I was working in the governor's office as a policy and communications advisor at the time, and we were accustomed to getting a heads up on big news. Usually it was bad news. It was like which factory was about to close or which public official was about to be indicted. But in this case, good news did not travel fast. It was kept under wraps. So we were reacting to that news in the governor's office just as other people were around the state. And maybe we echoed Mayor Hopewell's comments, if not his tears. We said, wow. This was amazing. And we had come through a period in the state when we were really looking at the role that higher education had to play if Michigan was going to be able to navigate its way from the industrial era, where we were unquestionably a leader not just in the nation but in the world, to this new era of the knowledge economy, where frankly our success in the previous era had left us badly positioned for the new one. You know, we'd gotten used to the idea that you could have a pretty darn good living without a lot of formal education. And now we were in a period where without that education, you were going to have at best a marginal living. So we weren't really well positioned for the new era. We were trying to figure out how to get there. And here comes the Kalamazoo Promise. So initially, we, I think like many people, looked at the Kalamazoo Promise as a scholarship program, perhaps the mother of all scholarship programs. But as we looked at it more closely, we really came to see it as urban policy. And I say that not to the exclusion of other areas, but because urban policy was a particular concern of ours. We had watched in Michigan the decline of our central cities. We had seen this flow of people and investment away from our core cities. And in my adult lifetime, we had come to see that as an unstoppable force, like some kind of slow-moving natural disaster that was only going to leave crumbling communities in its wake. But this promise idea from Kalamazoo offered us a way to give our center cities the edge for the first time in more than 2 generations. We knew it wouldn't happen overnight, and we knew it would probably take a Herculean effort to make it happen. But for the first time in a long time, we could see a way forward for Michigan's core cities. So working with lawmakers from both parties, we developed legislation that would allow 10 Michigan communities to be designated as promise zones, places where college education would be guaranteed for all. Well, designation is nice, but it doesn't pay a single tuition bill. So the problem we had to solve was where to get the money for these promise zones. Now, the state, and this is back in when we were doing this, we enacted the law at the end of 2008. The state was broke, and it was going to get even much more broke, that's appropriate, when the auto industry had the bottom fall out on it later in 2009. And with the state broke, we didn't know who these anonymous donors were in Kalamazoo, let alone their phone numbers. So we couldn't really go that route and ask those folks to double down. So we decided we had to come up with a different approach. And that while we would look for mega donors wherever we could find them, we thought the promise zones had to be able to essentially pull themselves up by their bootstraps. So what we came up with can best be described as a public-private partnership. Each promise zone would have to raise private funds wherever they could, and I do mean wherever. That could be everywhere from a major gift from a corporation in the community to a chicken dinner. I mean, and all the stops in between. But in addition to that private fundraising, they would also be able to tap federal and state dollars by requiring students to first apply for needs-based aid before the promise zone started paying their tuition bills. For many of our students attending community colleges where costs are lower, these public resources would end up paying most and in some cases all of the freight. And in those instances, the value added from the promise zone would not be cash. It would come from clarity and certainty. Despite all they do to help more people advance themselves educationally in the United States, the Pell Grant doesn't deliver that certainty. Even the high school seniors that are about to use it don't really understand it very well. And it certainly isn't clear to the parents of the second grader. And I think what Kalamazoo has taught us is how important it is to be able to intervene in these lives as early as possible if we're going to change those trajectories and those ultimate outcomes. So we realized that we had to be able to deliver that certainty, and the promise zones can do it early on in a child's life. After 2 years of operating, our promise zones are able to tap another public resource, they're able to capture half of the growth in our state education property tax that's collected within their borders. This mechanism is known as tax increment financing, invented no doubt by a bond attorney someplace, and it's been used across the country, perhaps in many of your communities, but it's been used to support bricks and mortar economic development programs. Through the Promise Zones, Michigan became the first state, first government anywhere really, to take that same concept, that same mechanism, and use it to support a different kind of economic development. The economic development that comes from being able to guarantee college education for all. And we're proud of that accomplishment. The reason this is important is that, and I think all of us would agree, one of the reasons we do the work we do is we believe that this promise of higher education will increase the value and wealth of our communities. It'll make them more vital places. It'll push property values up. It'll attract new investment into the core city, sometimes for the first time in a while. And so this mechanism allows us to capture that growth. In other words, we can take the effect of the promise and use it to help pay for the promise. Now, our Promise Zones use that mechanism. They use Pell and other needs-based aid, and they use their private resources. We think of it as a three-legged stool that holds up the Promise Zone. And that formula is one that can help us get to a universal place-based program without having to wait for kind of what we might think of as an angel donor to emerge. Now, our state law requires the Promise Zones at minimum to provide all students within their boundaries a tuition-free path to at least an associate's degree. And our Promise Zones, many of them have started with that goal, but none of them want to stay at that point. I mean, they've seen the gold standard in Kalamazoo. They want to get there, but they're able to do it incrementally by adding more and more opportunities to that basic commitment of universal access to an associate's degree. As I mentioned earlier, 8 of these 10 communities are already operating their scholarship programs, and the other 2 are under development. They are led by some extraordinary people, some of whom are with us today. And I'd like them to rise as I list their communities, and I'm going to ask all of you to give your applause to the leaders who are bringing this promise of higher education to Baldwin in northern Michigan. Ayanna, that's for you. To Benton Harbor in Muskegon County on the Lake Michigan shoreline. To Dallas Creek, Jackson, and Lansing in central Michigan. And to 4 communities that are linked by both a shared commitment to this endeavor and also by the Interstate I-75. Saginaw, Pontiac, Hazel Park, and of course the great city of Detroit. I've got a great job. I get to work with all these people. And I can tell you that there's no limit to their determination to make this work. They're not only making stronger communities one by one, but they are making a stronger and better Michigan. I think all of us in this room have been inspired by the Kalamazoo Promise. And I want to end by drawing kind of a conclusion that really, I think, animates our work in the Promise Zones. We've all been inspired by Kalamazoo. And I think we all want others to continue to be inspired. And the fact that we brought new communities here today shows that that is very much happening, okay? But what we don't want to have happen is this. We don't want people to be paralyzed by Kalamazoo. We don't want them to look at it and say, great, as soon as I find my anonymous billionaire, count me in, okay? That is the wrong conclusion to draw from Kalamazoo for 2 reasons. First, it ignores all the hard work that's gone into making Kalamazoo what it is today after the donor's commitment was made. And I think we have to recognize all our friends from Kalamazoo for that. It's an extraordinary effort. But secondly, the reason that's the wrong conclusion to draw is it makes us passive spectators in this process. And what we really need to be are kind of visionary, strong leaders who are helping our communities take charge of their own educational destinies. We created the Michigan Promise Zones because we believe the work of rebuilding our communities through higher education had to begin today. It couldn't wait for incredible acts of generosity. We had to have a model that could move forward of its own sheer will. And we believe that there are many ways to achieve this critical goal. Everything from billionaires on the one hand to bootstraps on the other, with plenty of stops in between. And I believe this conference is really designed to help each community find its own way, knowing that no two of our communities are the same. So we're hoping that our lasting contribution to the Promise movement is that we've been able to demonstrate a different way to achieve the same goal, one that respects and the achievement of others, but which offers another path for communities to follow. We hope that's our lasting contribution. We believe in the Promise movement. We're proud to be part of it, and we're proud to share with you in the important work of transforming our communities through higher education for all. Thank you.
College was once a dream for me. To really think that I could earn my high school diploma and say, I am going to earn a living doing what I love. But I gotta learn what it's about first, and the only skill they can get that at is at a professional college. As a supporter of the Promise, you are supporting people like myself. You are saying, you're worth it. There will be a time when we'll be able to walk across the stage with our college diploma and say, thank you for doing what you've done for us. Thank you for believing in me. And thank you for being a supporter of the Promise.
Good morning, friends. My name is Saleem Ghubril, and I am honored. I am honored to be the Chief Errand Officer at Pittsburgh Promise and to run the errands of our kids and our families and our neighborhoods, along with an amazing team of people who are my colleagues, some of whom are here today. So I'm going to begin by introducing them and then make a couple of quick comments. Our team at Pittsburgh Promise is just going to divide it up into two. One focuses on raising money and one focuses on serving kids, neighborhoods, and schools. And the team that focuses on kids, neighborhoods, and schools is here today. And that's led by Sean Butler, and then her colleagues, Jean Walker, who runs all of our programs in our schools, and our colleague, Steve Crosse, who is our technology dude. We're just going to make sure that we have all of the correct information on our fingertips. We also brought with us two very important partners to our work. You have partners like them in your work. And these two partners represent, one, a very large university, the University of Pittsburgh, and the other one represents our neighborhood, our county's community college, and they are Dr. Jennifer Iridy from the University of Pittsburgh and Dr. Rosalind Wilson from our community college in Allegheny County. So I'm going to ask you just a couple of questions. Are any of you in communities, and by the way, if the answer, if I describe you, would you mind stand and then stay standing? Are any of you serving kids in communities where you have some schools that just aren't budging? You are working really, really hard to transform the quality of education in your neighborhoods, but some schools are just such tough nuts to crack. They're not moving. Are any of you trying to raise money and you're breaking your back, you're making your case, you're showing data, you're effective at telling the story, and you think that you have absolutely the most important investment idea that could truly be transformative for your communities, but money just isn't flowing? Are any of you having to massage so many conflicting egos at the very same time. The egos are incompatible with one another. And you're trying, and it's impossible for you to keep everybody happy at the same time. On any given day, a third of your partners are pissed off at you. Yeah. How about, are any of you just kind of tired? You've been doing this for a little while, and you've heard stories of how, like, this is so impactful and it transforms lives and communities, and you hear about them and you see videos about them and you meet people who do them, and it's just not quite working out that way in your neck of the woods. Any of you are just kind of plain tired? Maybe feeling a little cynical? Anybody? A little jaded? Wondering if the stories you're hearing from up front are indeed true? Are any of you in this room because you wake up every single morning and regardless of the odds that are before you, you are absolutely determined that you're going to do right, whether it's by 50,000 kids or by one child, you're going to do right by that person every single day, that God gives you breath. Is that true of anybody in this room? I'm looking at you, and you all look way too tired to be standing up. Sit down, please. Sisters, brothers, frankly, what I just described is all of our realities. It's every single one of us facing those, are dealing with, facing these very same realities in all of our cities, all of our communities. And we want, right? We want the tide to rise and all boats to rise with it, and not create systems where there's a zero-sum game where it works in this area, but it works in this area because we're drawing resources from that. We're growing here because that's shrinking. We're improving here because that's dying. And that's not really the ultimate objective that any of us have. We want just things to be good for everybody. In Pittsburgh, we have been voted most livable city in America. And then we've even been voted one of the greatest cities in which to live in the world. And that's true, and we're proud of our city, and we've made great strides. But really, we're most livable for some. We're not most livable for all. We are a city of great neighborhoods, but some are experiencing stupendous prosperity, and others are still glittering, where kids are afraid to cross the street and go to school. And the work that we're all involved in is hard work. It's really, really hard. And we are pushing boulders uphill, and they don't move. And sometimes we have enough hands on the boulders to keep them stable. In the last 6 years that we've done our work, there has been a couple of moments where we had even some enough hands on the boulder to move it, not just keep it stable. But there have been times when we felt like the boulder is just going to roll us over, and we're just going to become pancakes. You have had days like that. I pastor a little church in one of our little neighborhoods in the city. It's a church that can't afford a pastor, and I'm the volunteer pastor, and I'm delighted, honored to serve in that capacity. And if you don't mind, I'm going to turn pastor on you for just a few minutes. I'm going to stay appropriate. We're going to be respectful of boundaries and differences, but I'm just going to turn preacher for just a tiny bit of our time together. There's a book in the New Testament called Hebrews, the book of Hebrews. And there's a chapter in that book of Hebrews where the writer, and we're not exactly sure who the writer is, but where the writer lists all of the giants of faith. And the writer starts with Abraham and tells us about Abraham and Sarah, and tells us about Isaac and Rebekah, and tells us about Jacob and Leah and Rachel, and tells us about Moses and Miriam, and tells us about Esther and Deborah, and tells us about Jeremiah and Nehemiah and Isaiah and all of the I's at the end. He just kind of tells us that one name after another, one story after another, and all of them are giants, right? Giants of the faith. And then, I love this line, my favorite line in that chapter. It's not anybody else's favorite line, but it goes like this. All these people were still living by faith when they died, not having yet received the promise that they were given. Living by faith when they died, not yet having received the promise. In other words, it may be more than our lifetimes before we see the transformation of which we speak and for which we hope. But I do hope that we will be found living by faith when we die. I hope no time soon, but when that day comes, even if we have not yet received the promise given.
Amen.
Not because it works. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, but because it's the right thing to do. So on my first day on the job, 5.5 years ago, my first board meeting, I said the following words. I said, you know, failure for us will be that 10 years will have passed. Our neighborhoods didn't change. Our schools didn't change. Our population didn't stop declining. Our enrollment didn't stop declining. Failure for us will be, we'll be done after 10 years and we will have sent somewhere between 10 and 15,000 kids to college. So the worst thing that we can do in our work is we will have sent 10 to 15,000 kids to college. If that's failure, I can live. I can live with that failure. So I started our segment with Evelyn's voice just kind of saying thank you. Thank you to you for supporting and working, plowing the field, and just doing the back-breaking, bone-crushing, sometimes exhilarating, often exhausting work in our various cities and communities. I wanted you to hear Evelyn say to you, thank you. 2 years ago when we hosted you in Pittsburgh, I told you about a young man named Jemiah. I met him at the beginning of his senior year of high school. I was there at the beginning of that school year, that was in September 2008, to do an assembly, a pep talk, with our high school seniors in that building. It was our worst performing school, so bad that 2 years ago we closed it. It's my neighborhood school, the neighborhood where I live. I gave the talk, did as much rah-rah as I could. Afterwards, at the end of the talk, Jemiah came up to me, he said, listen man, I heard you, cool, you have a promise for us, want to send us to college, great. You have a minimum GPA, I get it. I'm starting my senior year with a 1.9 GPA, doing 1. Was it under 7? I don't remember. Which was it, Sean? 1.7, 1.9, something like that. He said, I'm starting at 1.7. I'm starting my senior year with a 1.7 GPA. Do I still have a shot at this? I made up an answer. He said, yes, you still do. It's still mathematically possible for you to get your GPA up to the required minimum, but it would require 4 reporting periods back-to-back with nothing but straight A's. He said, okay, I know what I have to do. I forgot about him until his commencement, because I was the commencement speaker for that school that year. We're backstage, he sees me, he makes a beeline to me, practically pins me to the wall. He says, man, I did it. I did what you told me I had to do. Now, are you going to do what you told me you would do? Okay, like, who are you? What did I ask you to do? What did I tell you I would do? Of course, I remember. So I told him to come by my office on Monday, bring your report card. He did. He showed up on Monday with his report card. And lo and behold, he had 4 reporting periods back-to-back with nothing but A's. The dude did it after a 3-year cumulative of 1.7. 3 years, accumulated 1.7. 1 year, every grade he had was a straight A. And thankfully the math did work. However, even if it didn't, I would have given him the scholarship. That would have been an easy exception for us to make. So we gave him the scholarship. He got accepted to Penn State University on probation to study petroleum and gas engineering. He will graduate this December with his degree in petroleum and gas engineering. He maintained between a 3.2 and a 3.5 GPA all through college. We didn't, we didn't give him anything. We didn't. He did all the hard work. He had what it took. It was in him. It was in him. The promise was in him. All we did is we just kind of removed a couple of barriers. We just kind of plowed the field so that he didn't have any land off of the way. That's a good story. It gets better. Last year, our Public Housing Authority in our city hosted a number of dinners in all of our public housing facilities to honor kids who live in public housing who are honorable or high honorable. And they invited me to be the speaker of all of them, most of them. And the evening went something like this. We have dinner. After dinner, the Promise guy would have a talk, and after the Promise guy finished talking, the public housing person would come up and read the names of kids who live in that facility who are honorable or high honorable, and one by one they'd come forward if mom or dad or guardian wanted to come come with them, they could come with them, and the perk for the night is that they would have their picture taken with the promise guy. Everybody wants that. So we're at the public housing facility in my neighborhood where this kid that I described grew up. I knew that he lived there, but I didn't know his mom, didn't know his family. And there were 6 kids whose names were read, and one after the other came down, and the names sounded familiar. And with every announcement of each one of their names, there was a woman sitting in the audience who shouted, "Well, that's my baby!" And very proud of her children. And one by one, 6 times, this woman came forward with each one of her children to pose with the promise guy. And they were all this young man's younger siblings. And I'm crying like a little baby. And I finally tell her, like, "How did you do it? How did you do it? You know, you have all these odds against you. There are 7 of you, 7 children and you living in a 2-bedroom apartment in public housing. How did you manage to raise all of these stars?" And she said, "I didn't do it." She pointed to her older son. She said, "It's his example. They see what he's doing, and they are convinced that if he can do it, any moron can do it." And they see that after one summer of interning for Range Resources, he bought a used SUV. So education gets you opportunities. We want that too. So I don't know if our work is going to make the big, huge, systemic changes that all of us want, and we should continue to press for them. I don't know if it's going to do that. But if all we do is inspire one kid, and through whom we inspire his siblings, and through them we inspire their communities,